My name is David Suich, and I'm a retired mechanical engineer. And in 2007, I clicked on a YouTube video that changed the entire course of my life. And so now I'm a spiritual counselor and a near-death experience researcher. And in the last 15 years, I've heard somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 testimonies of people who have died, seen the afterlife, and returned.
What is the soul?
I believe that the soul is a tiny facet of God, so it's kind of the exact opposite of what an atheist would believe. So an atheist believes that we are human beings pretending that there is a God, and I believe that we are little facets of God pretending to be human. So you can think of the soul the same way that we would think of our children. Two people get together, they form a new life, it grows into its own individual separate life, and that's kind of how the soul works. A tiny facet of God is separated. It's not a true separation, it's only a perspective of a separation. It grows and has its own individual experiences, but it's always part of the whole that we call God.
What's the difference between a young soul and an old soul?
Well, one of the things they say in the afterlife is that there is no time, that time is an illusion. So when we talk about a soul, we're kind of doing it from an earthly perspective. But a younger soul would be one that's less experienced, that hasn't had too many physical incarnations. And an older soul is one that has had many incarnations, not just on Earth, but on other planets, and maybe even as other forms of life. Okay, so the way you can think of an old soul versus a young soul is that God takes a tiny little portion of his energy and separates it. Now, it's never truly separated, but it has a unique perspective. And that soul then begins to have its own experiences. So that soul may decide to incarnate on Earth or another planet with intelligent life. It may decide to take on various tasks in heaven, just like down here on Earth, we do many different things. In heaven, they have many different job responsibilities and activities that they do. And an older soul is simply one that's been around longer, had a lot more experiences, and has learned and grown from those experiences. And older souls will have many incarnations into many different lifetimes, and I've heard from near-death experiencers that at a certain point, they can't learn any more from their incarnations. So they take on a larger role in heaven, possibly guiding or teaching others or helping people on Earth. And at some point, when the soul grows to a certain level, it decides to merge back with Source, with God. But we never lose our individuality completely. You can think about it like a movie or a music file on your computer. When your computer's turned off, it's just ones and zeros. It's all the same thing on the hard drive. But at any given time, you can pull that song out, and it's its own individual song with its own melody and its own music, and it's the same with us as souls. Even when we merge with God, we never lose our individuality.
What is the soul's relation to Source/God?
The relationship between soul and God is almost a projection. Who we are is an extension of the creative, benevolent source of all life that is. And by having this unique perspective, we kind of see the whole as something different. So if you can imagine looking at the Earth from space. Now you can look at the entire Earth, and we can think of this Earth as representing God. And what a soul is if I were to go down to just one tiny little neighborhood and one little house and go inside of that house and look around. And my perspective is a very limited, unique perspective. And by having that limited perspective, I sort of gain information and knowledge that I wouldn't by looking at the whole. So the soul really is little pieces of God separating, having their own unique experiences, and then looking back at the rest of God from that unique perspective. And that is part of the process of growth of creation, is this limiting of consciousness or limiting of perspective, and then looking back at the whole. So every soul really is part of the fractal of God. And when we all look at the rest of what we're seeing, we see it from a different perspective. We see it from a unique perspective, and we appreciate it more. And that's how creation grows, by this process. And so a good analogy of why we are connected to Source and why we have these unique perspectives is like the leaves on a tree. So if you were to take the consciousness of that tree and just focus on one leaf, what does the rest of the tree look like from that leaf? Well, it's a very unique perspective, and every leaf has a little bit different view of the whole tree, or a little piece of the bark sees a little bit different perspective of the whole tree. So the soul is basically God getting to know himself by viewing himself from unique individual perspectives. And we are those perspectives. We are those individuals. We are those leaves on the tree.
Are human incarnations voluntarily chosen?
Oh, they are absolutely voluntarily chosen. You know, when a climber is climbing Mount Everest, he's going to be suffering. He's going to be cold and tired and miserable. And there's going to be times where he says, why the heck did I do this? But he did it because he's taking on a big challenge, and he's growing and getting stronger from it. And it's the same with these lives. When we're down here on earth, it may seem like a crazy thing to choose, but really we're doing it because it was an important job for part of the creation process, and we wanted to come down here. It's something we worked on and we applied for, and we strive to make it down here. You know, we are doing the Mount Everest of physical incarnations by coming down here on earth, and it's something to be proud of, even though it's very difficult in the process. So these lives we have down here on earth are extremely difficult, but they are such a huge growth and learning experience and an expansion of consciousness that for every 100 souls that qualifies to come down to earth, and you've got to be an advanced soul to come down here, there's only one body. So it's an application process, it's a qualification process, and it's a great honor and privilege to be down here and doing the great work we're doing for creation.
Does the soul plan its incarnations ahead of time?
Yes, there's absolutely soul planning that happens. I've heard from near-death experiencers this process of getting together with some elders or experienced spirits in heaven and choosing their parents, choosing their major life events, choosing their major challenges. They are well aware of the potentials of the things that could happen before they come down here. And often the soul will want to take on more challenges and kind of try and bite off more than they can chew. And the spirit guides up there will kind of say, well, you know, you need to not take on too big of a challenge. And it's always a balance. If you don't take on enough challenges, you won't learn. If you take on too big of a challenge, you could fail. And of course, with these wise spirits who are guiding us and helping us plan our lives, we are never given challenges on this earth that we're incapable of overcoming. So definitely there is soul planning that goes on. The soul planning is much like a vacation itinerary. So some people think, well, if there's a plan, I don't have free will. Well, no, you do have free will, just like a vacation itinerary. You choose the major events, the major places you're going to go, and then you kind of fill in the details when you get there. And it's the same with our lives here on earth. And because we have free will, we can always choose to deviate from the soul plan. So some people, when they have their near-death experience, they encounter the being of light and they are told, it's not your time, you have to go back. You haven't finished what you started, you haven't completed your plan, you haven't met your life goals. Others are told, yes, you've met your goals, you can stay here in heaven if you want, but if you want to go back and continue your work, these are going to be the benefits to humanity. And they'll actually show the individual the benefits to their family or the people around them or the people they're going to affect in a positive way. And of course, if I heard their testimony, they came back, they chose to come back.
Do we have soul groups that we incarnate with across different lifetimes?
So I've heard the process in heaven of soul groups getting together and planning incarnations. And it's really kind of fascinating because I never realized that souls did this, and it makes sense. Human beings do the same thing. Groups of people get together and they go on a skiing trip together or scuba diving or hiking and that kind of thing. And souls will do the same thing. They'll get together and they say, well, we're going to have this plan. This time I'm going to be your brother, and maybe the next lifetime around we're going to be father and son, or we're going to be boss and employee, or we're going to hate each other, we're going to like each other. And so they come up with all these different plans, and it's kind of a fun thing for the souls. They put themselves in different situations and different scenarios, and they see how they do.
Are there contracts or agreements between souls?
So the souls do make contracts in their soul groups, and these are more agreements about what they're going to do. So just like a weightlifter needs some weights that are heavy enough to stress their muscles, the people in these soul groups, they need challenges that will stress their ability to love, to show love here on earth. So they'll do things like, okay, we're going to decide this lifetime around, we're going to be two brothers that hate each other. And then you learn and grow from those experiences. Or they may say, we're going to be husband and wife and have these three children, and these three people are going to play that role. And you're going to be the parent that really supports the children. And so they take on all these roles and plan both what I would call negative and positive experiences, but it's all for the purposes of learning and growing consciousness. So one of the things that near-death experiencers talk about over and over again is the unconditional love of heaven. Well, how on earth, by having these soul contracts where negative things happen, do we grow this unconditional love? It's easy for me to be kind and loving to people who are treating me good, or when my circumstances are ideal and I'm having a great day. But it's a lot more difficult to show love to my fellow man in stressful or difficult circumstances. And so these souls, they will choose to have some very difficult, horrific, and painful circumstances and experiences to test the limits of their unconditional love. And just like a weightlifter lifting heavier and heavier weights to stress his muscle and get stronger, we challenge ourselves with difficult situations to learn to be unconditional loving in all those situations.
Do spirit guides or angels assist us?
One of the first near-death experiences I ever heard, when they sent him back to Earth, he didn't want to come back. And he said, if you send me back there, I'm going to die of a broken heart because, I'm experiencing this amazing love from you guys. And then I'll be down there and you'll be up here and I'll die of a broken heart. And they said to him, do you not get it? Do you not understand? We've been showing you all these things. We've been, explaining all this to you. You've never been down there alone. You've never been alone for 1 second. So it came as a great shock to me to find out that we have more than double spiritual guides and angels than there are people on earth. And we're never alone, not for one moment down here. We might feel like we're alone, but they're always here helping us and guiding us. Now, one of the ways they do this is they can shine emotions on us. If I'm having a problem with anger at my brother, they can send an angel who's a specialist in forgiveness and reconciliation. He can shine that emotion on me. And this is not control. The human being has free will, can always reject the suggestion. But more often than not, we follow their advice. And we also hear them in the form of a thought in our heads, and you'll experience this. Maybe you're having a really bad day and you're at the end of your rope and you just think you can't go on. And right at that moment, your best friend calls you and has a nice long talk with you. Well, that's the angelic guide saying to your best friend, hey, call your friend. They're having a hard time. And sometimes we don't even know that we're reacting to their help, but they're always here helping us. One of the things they do is they prevent accidents from happening, or they will reduce the amount of injury and damage in accidents. So I had a friend of mine who was a pastor, and his car went off of a curve on the side of a mountain and rolled 200 feet down this cliff. And he came out with nothing more than a sprained ankle. And when I asked him, how is this possible? He said, I felt a definite spiritual bubble of protection, protecting me. So they even work in protecting us physically. And I've been told by near-death experiencers that we'd have a lot more accidents and a lot more bad things happening if it weren't for angelic interference and help.
What is the veil of forgetting and why do we need it?
Well, the veil of forgetfulness is something that's necessary for physical life. If we could remember all of our past lifetimes and remember our heavenly origin, it would make life down here on earth too easy. The challenges wouldn't be challenges, they'd be a cakewalk. So a good example of how this is a necessary part of the learning process, and we really don't learn anything down here in terms of information and knowledge because we already knew everything in heaven, but it's experiential learning. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, imagine an engineer who is the head engineer at Disneyland, and he has designed every ride and knows every nut and bolt, and he's been on every ride 100 times. He knows Disneyland like the back of his hand. Now, how does he experience Disneyland the way it's meant to be experienced? Well, what if that engineer could put himself in the consciousness of a 10-year-old child who's never been to Disneyland? So he's lowering his consciousness, and he's also forgetting. So this engineer puts himself in the consciousness of a 10-year-old child and goes to Disneyland for the first time and enjoys the wonders and the beauties and the excitement of every ride. Now, he hasn't technically learned anything new, but the experience was much different. And that's much like what we're doing down here on Earth. Well, one of the things that came kind of as a shock to me is to find out that these lifetimes that we're living, and God experiences everything that every being in all of creation experiences, is that he has a lot of fun through us. I mean, how fun is it for the immortal, powerful, all-knowing creator of the universe to be surprised? The one that knows everything that's happened, everything that is now, and everything that will be and can't be surprised, to limit his consciousness and be surprised. I mean, it's kind of like when a parent watches their little 2-year-old child, and the child will do something or say something that totally shocks them or makes them laugh. And apparently God has a lot of fun through these physical lives and experiencing life through us. And that came as a surprise to me.
Discuss the role of free will in a given incarnation.
Both in heaven and on earth, we always have freedom. But free will, from a spiritual standpoint, is something completely different. So in heaven, we're all connected. Well, what if we were connected here on earth? What if, for instance, you were connected to your dog? And so if you kicked your dog, you would feel the pain. If you pet your dog, you would feel the pleasure of that. You wouldn't really have the option to act out in fear or to be cruel because you're going to experience the same negative thing. So you always have freedom in heaven, but down here on earth, we have free will. So we experience an illusion of separateness, and then you can decide to pet the dog or to kick the dog. Now, if you pet the dog, when you make that choice of love instead of fear, that is what causes the process of the growth of creation. When we have the free will choice to choose between love and fear, and we choose the love choice. So what would be a good example of us exercising free will? Let's say you come home and you find out that your 5-year-old child has set fire to the living room carpet and destroyed it. And you're very angry. Now, you can make the choice to lovingly tell your child, to be more careful in the future and talk to them about the importance of being safe in the house. Or you could really yell and scream at the child. So you could make a choice out of fear or make a choice out of love. Putting ourselves in the place of the child. How would I want to be treated if it were me being the child setting fire to the living room carpet? How would I want my parent to treat me? When we learn to make that more benevolent choice of compassion and unconditional love, that is the learning experience that grows creation, that helps the fractal of God grow.
Is life on the physical plane an illusion?
Well, one of the things that near-death experiencers say when they first die and come out of their body is they say it's much like waking up from a dream. When you are dreaming, you believe that your dream world is very real. It's only when you wake up that you realize, oh, this is the real world. That dream world wasn't at all real. And near-death experiencers say the same thing. When they come out of their bodies, they feel more real and more alive than they've ever felt in their lives, filled up with life, heightened emotions, a clarity of thought that we just don't have here on earth. So it's a very real experience being down here in these physical lives. But compared to the environment of heaven, yes, these lives are much like a dream.
Describe the life between lives.
So I don't like to call it a life between lives. I prefer to look at it like heaven being our true home. And just like when you're in your house, every now and then you decide to go out on a vacation and have an adventure. And that's kind of like what it is in heaven. You're in this beautiful, perfect place filled with love and beauty beyond description of human words. And once in a while, you decide to have an adventure far from home. So what we do up in heaven are many similar things to what we do on earth. Now, down here on earth, we have our job, which we probably wouldn't do if we were independently wealthy. And a lot of people don't like their jobs. And then we have our leisure time. Well, in heaven, it's all the same. You're going to be doing a job, but it's going to be something that you love doing. And so there are great musicians, there are great artists and creators, there are engineers who design and build, planets and solar systems and galaxies. There are great teachers and spiritual leaders. You can study with one of the heaven's great musicians. You can learn from Mozart if you want. There are times of play in heaven. There are entire areas that are set up just to frolic and play like children. And so there are many activities in heaven, just countless. It's the most fun, adventurous, amazing, wonderful place that you can imagine. And there are no limits to what can be done up there. We're only limited in heaven by the limits of our own creativity and imagination. And those abilities of creativity and imagination don't really have any limits. So the things that we can do in heaven are without end. It's infinite.
Why would a soul choose to leave heaven?
Near-death experiencers, they talk about heaven as the most amazing, beautiful place. Everybody who visits heaven just for 1 second wants to stay there forever. So that brings the question, why in the world would we leave that perfect environment and come down here and have these difficult lives on earth where we suffer? Well, to have growth, there's got to be a stressful environment. And the infinite love, the infinite creator cannot limit itself only to the love side of the equation. A small portion of creation has to have a choice and experience the opposite for the love of heaven to exist. Now, I don't understand it completely, but I have heard that by doing what we're doing, by having these physical lives, by incarnating and coming down here, and having the choice between love and fear, we are holding the space for the love of heaven to exist. If we were not doing what we did, the growth would stop. So a good analogy would be a billionaire who grows up in a wealthy household. They have master chefs cooking every meal. He eats only in 5-star restaurants and really appreciates good food. And let's say that this billionaire is sitting down in the restaurant having a meal at a 5-star restaurant, one of his favorite dishes. He's going to really enjoy that meal. Now, what about a starving man on the streets of Haiti? And he has not eaten in 2 or 3 days, and his family is hungry, and he makes money only by getting odd jobs, and he finally got a little job this day, and it was enough money to buy a small bag of rice and beans. And he brings it home to his family, who hasn't eaten in several days, and they sit down and they eat this very bland meal. Who do you think is going to appreciate the meal more, the billionaire or the poor man in Haiti? It would be hard for that billionaire to muster the kind of gratitude that the poor man had at finally having a meal after 2 days of hunger. And gratitude is an energy. It's a magnet for abundance of the thing that we're grateful for. So by experiencing contrasts, experiencing the opposite of love, fear, we strengthen that which we want by experiencing that which we do not want.
Are we judged or punished for our mistakes in the afterlife?
One of the things that was a real comfort to me to find out from near-death experiencers, and that is there is no judgment. You know, these people go through these life reviews, and the harshest judge is themselves. There is no judgment from our Heavenly Father. We are loved unconditionally, regardless of our decisions to act in light or darkness. We came here to experience duality. We came here to be able to have the choice between love and fear. So of course there's no judgment. The way heaven feels about us is the same way a loving mother and father feels about their 2-year-old child. You know, the child might misbehave, might cause some problems, you know, might break my favorite vase, but they just adore that child. And that's how heaven looks at us. With all of our faults and all of our shortcomings, we are just adored. And we're also honored for doing this very difficult job down here on earth.
Describe the life review.
So the life review is very interesting, and it's different for near-death experiencers. Some experience a review of just highlights of their life, and others re-experience everything they ever said, thought, did, and felt. Now, this life review is not a judgment. It's not a condemnation. It's just a learning experience to show the soul or the individual how other people reacted according to what they did. So in this life review, you experience something that's very different than what we're used to here. In this life, you're always one person, you. You know, I hear from my ears, I see through my eyes. But in the life review in heaven, you are simultaneously you again, doing whatever scene is in front of you, and you are simultaneously the people around you. So you become every person you've ever interacted with, and you experience what they experienced in reaction to what you did. So an example would be one woman, she tied a ribbon around her dog's neck, and she tied it a little too tight. And she had no intention of hurting the dog. And in her life review, she experienced it being the dog with this tight ribbon around its neck all day and being uncomfortable and difficult to breathe. Another person said that they were driving on their way to work, and they saw this woman who had been stranded out in the cold back east, and it was snowing, and this was before the days of cell phones, and if you didn't get help, you could freeze to death. I mean, I lived back east, and every now and then you'd hear a story about somebody freezing to death. And so this woman in her life review, she's reliving this experience where she stops to help this stranded motorist and then hurries off to work without even waiting to be thanked. And in her life review, she experiences it from the point of view of that woman who was stranded and getting nervous that nobody is stopping to help. And all of a sudden this angel comes and gives her a jump start and saves her. So what they are trying to teach us in these life reviews is a real simple, easy lesson. When we are loving people, kind and considerate of others, it makes all of heaven joyful. And when we are cruel and selfish and manipulative, it makes all of heaven a little bit sad. What they are trying to teach us in a nutshell is what Jesus said in the Bible, that the whole purpose of life is to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's what we were born to do. That's what we were created to do and learn in this world. So the life review is really teaching us the importance of unconditional love. And that means just what it says, love in all conditions. One of the things I hear from near-death experiencers is that nothing is more meaningful to God than when we are purposefully kind and compassionate, especially to those who our ego tells us does not deserve our love and compassion. That's what's meaningful to heaven. And those are the hard cases to love. And again, it's like exercising that spiritual muscle. We're trying to become the best versions of ourselves possible, and that involves loving those that are difficult to love.
What is karma?
Well, karma is an energy, and it comes from a universal spiritual law. So when I was a Christian, I was taught that be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And I was taught that that was a threat of punishment. You know, if you don't obey God's laws, there's going to be consequences. Really, I think Jesus was describing a basic spiritual law. And that law is whatever a human being focuses their attention and their energy and their emotion, it goes out into the universe, gets multiplied by 10, and comes back. So if I go around being cruel and selfish, I'm going to be surrounded eventually by cruelty and selfishness. If I go around being loving and compassionate, I'm eventually going to be surrounded by people and circumstances of love and compassion. So karma is just the universe kind of giving you what you want. And really, it doesn't work in the sense of giving us what we say we want. Karma gives you who you are and how you behave. And it takes that and multiplies it. And we can make any choices we want. And if we make choices that bring us a bad karma and attract things we don't want, well, that's a learning experience to start focusing on the things that we do want.
How do you define forgiveness?
Forgiveness. Forgiveness can be forgetting. It can be putting yourself in the other person's shoes. It can be connecting with the energy of compassion. You know, when we're holding a grudge against another person, it always harms us more than it does the other person. And so forgiveness can also be just letting go of the anger and the resentment for our own benefit. And we're supposed to learn to forgive in our spiritual journeys. And when we get to a certain point in our spiritual maturity, we're going to come to a realization that there's nothing to forgive. Certainly from an earthly perspective, when one human being does something horrible to another, there's the need for forgiveness. But from a heavenly perspective, this is what we came down here to do. We came down here to experience duality, to experience both good and bad things. And if you go to a play in a theater, and the end of the play comes along, and the curtain comes up, and the actors all come out to take a bow, we don't boo the actor who played the bad guy and have him arrested and cheer the actor who played the good guy. It was just a play. And these lives down here are only situations that are temporary. In heaven, in the afterlife, we're all connected, we're all one. And so there's really nothing to forgive. In the afterlife, we realized it was just a game that we were playing for the purposes of growth of consciousness. And the game isn't something trivial. It's a necessary game for the continuation of creation, for the continuation of the growth of God. So you cannot have an infinite creator with infinite unconditional love unless a small part of the creation is experiencing the opposite of that. And so near-death experiencers have been told that by coming down here and experiencing being both the good person and the bad person, by acting out in love and fear, by making those choices, we are part of the engine of growth of God. And without it, the love of creation couldn't continue to exist. We have to have the choice for that love to continue to exist and grow.
Discuss the idea of oneness/unity and how we can apply it in our everyday lives.
One day I was out on a bicycle path in California riding my bike, and I saw this giant billboard, and it said, "None of us are okay until all of us are okay." And that's pretty much true. One of the things I hear from near-death experiencers is that we're all connected, and that when you bring hope or joy to just one soul, all of humanity benefits. When you harm one person, all of humanity suffers from that. So one of the things that we're waking up to in our culture, part of the Great Awakening, is that we are all connected, and that we cannot leave just one person out in the cold and forgotten because it harms the whole. And so right now there's a society that's out of balance with selfishness, and there's a few people that are out of balance with giving too much service to humanity. And we have to strike a good balance in loving ourselves and loving others. and we are coming back into balance as a worldwide culture. And part of that's just going to be realizing that every action we take, every word we speak has an effect on another. And we cannot separate ourselves from the consequences of those actions and those words.
Where is heaven?
What is heaven? Well, in the afterlife, they create what's called a quantum space. And within that space, anything the mind or the imagination can create happens. And so there are countless realms in heaven, all different based on the creative imagination of the people in those realms. And there are some parts of heaven that are so amazing and wondrous they can't be described in human words. There are other parts that are kind of laid out like Earth, with roads and buildings and parks and gardens and flowers that glow with their own light and sing, and giant trees that tower far higher than our redwoods and sequoias. And it's really a place of limitless imagination and creativity.
Where is God?
So a person dies. They have a near-death experience. They find themselves in the tunnel going towards this beautiful light that is so beautiful they cannot describe it with human words. And they come into this light that's 10,000 times brighter than the sun, filled up with a love that is unimaginable, infinite love, this beautiful, powerful being. And people talk about it like it's the best experience they've ever had in their lives. It's the all, it's the everything of life is to be in the presence of this being. And then they look and they say, who is this? And then they remember, it's me. That powerful being, that's me. And I was just pretending to be human. It's almost unbelievable, but I believe it's true.
Many believe we're shifting to a higher consciousness on this planet. Do you agree? And if so, can you describe this shift?
There is a great awakening taking place. And many souls who have been incarnating here for a long time have been looking forward to this time. It's a time of great change and also a time of great chaos. There's going to be some shakeups. With any big changes, there's always going to be some suffering. But it is a beautiful time to be here. For thousands and thousands of years, there was a paradigm. There was a way humanity did things, and that was you connected yourself to a group or a city or an army or something as big as the Roman Empire, and you made yourself as strong as possible. And if you wanted to survive, you took from others by force. Things are different now. We don't need the cutthroat competition anymore. With our technology, with our amazing communication abilities, with our mass manufacturing, there's a new paradigm. And that new paradigm is there is enough for everyone. What we have is a resource distribution problem, not a resource scarcity. And we're finally waking up to that as a species. And when cooperation takes over from competition, it's going to make for a much more productive and much better world because people are going to be truly cooperating with each other. Now, some people think that in this new world of love, we're all going to be holding hands and singing Kumbaya. And that's not the case. There's always going to be disagreements, but it will be like a healthy family. The brothers and sisters may get into disagreements and they may get mad at each other and not talk to each other, but they're not going to pick up guns and knives and start killing each other. It's going to be a world of peace where we respect each other, we respect the planet, and we never, ever, ever pick up sticks and stones to fight each other.
What's the secret to remembering who we really are?
The secret to remembering who we really are is to quiet the mind. And this can be done with meditation. It can be done by listening to uplifting music. It can be done by just going onto YouTube and typing in acts of compassion. Anytime a human being sees an act of love or compassion, what happens? We kind of well up inside. We get teary-eyed and we get this beautiful feeling. And that's because of our common connection. It's a remembrance of our common connection and the way we love each other in the afterlife. And so every kind action, every gentle thought, every unselfish deed becomes a pillar of beauty, not only in this life, but in the one to come.
What does our soul want us to know?
I think if my higher self, my soul, was talking to me directly as me, David, the human being, I think my higher self would say, you know, you're not just here to learn and grow. You're here to have fun and have a good time. And so we're supposed to enjoy these experiences and not be so hard on ourselves. You know, every parent knows long before their child is born that their child is going to make many mistakes. And we are so hard on ourselves as human beings. And there are so many people that feel like they've failed themselves or they're a failure in life. And that's just not the case. Just being here, a human being, a generator of light and love on this planet, coming down here and doing the tough work in duality and choosing between love and fear, that's not easy. But it's a beautiful thing we're doing. It's a fun game. It's a game where we learn and grow and we help our Father. And so I would say the message from the soul is relax. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to screw up. It's part of the reason you came down here. Do the best you can. Try and learn from your mistakes. Have a good life. Do the things that make you happy. Make a contribution that helps humanity. It's like food to the soul when you show love and compassion and help your fellow human being.
Is there a positive message or message of hope you'd like to leave us with?
One of the things that terrified me when I was a child is when I was taught by my religion that Earth was a pass-fail test. And then I had to obey these rules, and if I didn't, there was going to be eternal punishment. And the best, most beautiful message of hope to me and to all of humanity is that there is no judgment. There is no condemnation. Our Heavenly Father loves us with a love that can't even be conceived of with our human brains. There is not a single thing any human being on this planet could do to make our Heavenly Father love us one bit less. He just loves and adores us for being His children. And it's our job to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be and become the most beautiful children of God that we can be, to honor the gift of life from our Father. You know, I learned so much from what near-death experiencers teach me. But sometimes these esoteric spiritual concepts just, it seems so complicated. And sometimes my head is swimming trying to figure it all out. And really, love is not complicated at all. Unconditional love is so simple that even a child can do it, and they do. You know, children, they're not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. They're not upset about what happened yesterday. They're living in the moment. They're quick to enjoy things and find joy in all circumstances and quick to forgive. You know, you go to the DMV and there's a bunch of miserable people waiting in line. They don't want to be there. There's only one group of people having fun. That's the children. And so we are called by our Heavenly Father to be like we were when we were young children and to just love without reserve. If you were having a bad day and you were out in public and I said, well, you know, go up to a stranger and tell them I'm having a bad day and I really need a hug and see if you get a hug, you probably wouldn't get a hug. But you go up to a child and say that, and there's a good chance he's going to give you a hug. And that's how we're supposed to be with our love, innocent and free. And you don't have to have an ounce of spiritual knowledge to love like a child loves.